Hi guys, welcome back again to my YouTube channel. In today's video, we'll be talking about creating a custom Laravel authentication model. Laravel's default authentication system uses a user model to authenticate users, but sometimes we need to use a different model to authenticate users based on our specific requirements. So in this video, we'll walk you through how to create a custom authenticable model in Laravel and use it for authentication. So let's dive in. I have now my terminal open. So right now I'm gonna create a new Laravel project. So composer, create project, Laravel slash Laravel space our project name, my Laravel app. Code my Laravel app, and I will now close my terminal and open and maximize this window. And here I will split my terminal, my VS Code terminal into two. Here. So on my right side, I will run the PHP artisan or the Laravel CLI command, and on my left, all my other CLI. The first thing we're gonna do is to connect our Laravel app to our database. So I will just open my database here. So as you can see in my database manager, I have, so let's expand this one. And currently our PISDB contains one table, which is the T employee. And let's check the columns and fields. So currently my T employee table contains MID, full name, email, and password. So we're gonna using this existing table to our Laravel app. So let's go ahead to our Laravel and define our database connection here. So our database name would be PISDB, username is root, and I don't have password for. So here I'm gonna type PHP artisan serve, hit enter, and control click this one so it will be open in our browser. So our Laravel project now is running, and now the next thing I'm gonna do is to create the login page, registration page, and the dashboard page. So for now I will just post the video. So I'm finished up creating my login and register page, so let's check. So as you can see here, I already have the links for the login and register. So let's click on the login first. So these are UI for login, and also our registration page is also here. And now let's go ahead and create a custom authenticable model in Laravel. So by default, Laravel uses the user model. So the users model points to our users table in our database, but currently we don't have that one, and instead we only have the T employee table. So we will make a custom authenticable model using the T employee table. Okay. So but before that, we need to migrate first our default Laravel's migration. So as you can see here in our database migrations, we have 4 files here. So which will create the create password reset tokens, create failed jobs, and the personal access tokens, and lastly the users table. So we need to migrate this one for our authentication works. So what I'm gonna do now is migrate our default migration. So PHP artisan migrate, and as you can see the table is already migrated. And let's check to our database manager, and let's just refresh this one. And here, as you can see, under my PISDB, I have additional tables. So this is the Laravel's migration. And also we have a table for our users. Let's focus on the T employee. So we will not modify the users table. So only the T employee later. And now, what I'm gonna do now is create a model for our T employee. So let's create a model first. PHP artisan make model, and our model name would be employee, and hit enter, and model already created. And let's go ahead to our models and employee here. So as I mentioned before, the default model for the authentication that Laravel uses is the user model, and let's make our employee model to be authenticable. So let's just import the user's model. So use user model, and I will just rename this as authenticable. And our employees model, I will extend the authenticable here. And in this line, I will now declare my tables for our employee. So protected table is the employee, and our primary key is the MID, MID, and we don't have the timestamps columns, which is the created at and updated at. So let's just make it false. So public timestamps is equal to false, and what else? And lastly, protected fillable. So our fillables are the ID, because we want to manually enter our employee ID, name or full name, and email. So MID, full name, email, and also password maybe. I think password is optional here. So but let's just put it here. So now what I'm gonna do next is I will go to the config and auth. So inside here, I'm gonna modify the default configuration of our auth. So passwords, so I will use the employee, and also guards, driver session, provider. Here users, I'm gonna replace it with employee, and providers, so I'm gonna use the T employee. And here the model will not the user model anymore, so instead we will use the employee model. And resetting, so here place that one. So I think we're good to go now. So save, and now let's create a registration function. So let's go to our auth controller and create the register. Public function register. So we'll accept the request, and let's start validating the field. So MID, let's require this one, and this should be numeric. So let's check. So let's get the validator error, but only the first one, the first message. And there you go. So if our validator has no error, then it will proceed below. So let's create the user. So 1047 1 2 3 4 5 6 7 8 9. Sign up base table or view not found best employee. Okay, let's check our validation. In our auth controller, we use the employee. I think we should use the table, the employee. And let's try it again. It is amazing. So let's enter our password, sign up, and there we go. So the emp ID field must not greater than 10. Oh, okay, so let's just remove this one. Emp ID. So as you can see, our validation messages is working. Sign up. So a new user has been registered. So let's check our database and run that one. So here, there you go. So as you can see, we have now record in our T employee. But as you can notice here in our password is not encrypted. So what I'm gonna do now is let's go back to our employee model and assign the password. So let's just override this function, public function get auth password. So we will return this password. So let's try if it works now. So sign up. A user has been registered, and let's check it again. So it's still not encrypting our password. Mhm. So so when creating a custom authenticable model, so we need to manually declare the fields that we're going to insert. So to avoid those kind of errors. So password. So our password will be the request password, and let's hash this password. So hash make that one. So let's try to register again. So sign up and check again to our database. So as you can see, our newly created user, which is John, has now a password encrypted. So that's how you register a user in Laravel. Okay, so we are now done with our registration part, and let's now proceed to our login. So we'll create a new function here, public function login. Also copy this validator. After that, let's manually log in the user if attempt. So we need to define the credentials first. Credentials. So let's try the request email, request password. So if auth attempt credentials. So if our login is successful, then we will redirect our user to the dashboard. So let's make an intended route. So let's redirect our user to our homepage. Incorrect username or password. Email. So let's try. So let's go ahead to our registration, our login page. So email and password. So let's go to our login. Our login. So what we have here, john@gmail.com. So let's try. john@gmail.com. Login. So we have an error. Column not found and column 0 in word close. Okay. So let's modify our credentials. So let's assign each. So email. Let's try this one. Password. So as you can see, we already redirected to our homepage. So this is the protected route. So only authenticated users can access this /home page. So we are done, but yes, we're done. The question is, what if we want to use other fields for our login? For example, so instead of using email and password, what if we want to use the emp ID and the password for our login? So we can still do that, but we need to modify this emp ID. So let's try this one. And also in our login blade, I will just copy this one and comment and paste and replace it with employee ID and number emp ID. So also this one emp ID. So let's try this approach. So let's go back to our login again. So let's try to log in. So our employee ID is 1238 1238 and password. So let's try if we can do that. So the emp ID field must be a valid email address. Okay. So So let's just remove the uh, extra validation here, and let's try. So as you can see, we can still log in using a different column using the emp ID. Okay. So the other one is, what if in our T employee, so we don't have the password, or our password column is different. So for example, let's alter our table. And this one, instead of password, what if this is passcode? Okay. So apply and close. So let's refresh here. So let's try to log in if it still works, and also modify passcode. So let's try. So as you can see, it has an error, incorrect email or password, because by default Laravel uses the password keyword. Okay. So instead, let's just override the password. So that's why we created earlier the public function get out password. Okay. But this time, this is not a password anymore, but instead pass code, and also this one. So this should be passcode. Okay, so we just override the default key password into passcode. So save, and let's try to log in again. Sign in. So as you can see, we can still sign in using different column for our password and passcode. So that's how we do a manual authentication using custom authenticable model in our database. So let's try to retrieve the currently logged in user. So here in our home controller, let's just get the current user. So auth user. So let's try to retrieve the full name. User full name. So refresh. So as you can see, we can still retrieve the user. So I hope you guys enjoy watching this video, and I hope you learned something new, and thank you for watching.